we got to play an hour and a half of Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, and there is a lot more to it than we initially thought, so let's talk about it. We got to play an hour and a half of the game. We're playing it on PC. We had the devs with us, so they were able to answer all of our questions. The demo was the first couple of missions of Phantom Liberty. We got to save the president, whose plane crashed in Dogtown, which is the new area in the game.
Which is nestled in Pacifica.
Yes.
So it is part of the map. However, it is tough to get in and out. And sort of what we saw is it was right after V had been smuggled into Dogtown.
Yes, exactly. And then we did like a whole mission where we found like an apartment, like a safe house to like hide her away, had like a confrontation. And then she asked us to go find Solomon Reed, which is Idris Elba's character.
The king. When you first meet Idris Elba or Solomon Reed, he is a sleeper cell in Dogtown. He's basically been in cover for 11 years, I think they said?
Yeah, something like that.
And you basically need to get him out of it. And he has a very gruff, foreboding presence, as you'd expect Idris Elba to have.
There's a good quest line where he asks if you've been followed, and you're like, no, I haven't been followed. And it turns out you totally were followed.
Yeah, but the reason, so we didn't get to play this mission, but the reason we were followed is because we didn't do enough prep work before meeting Solomon Reed. They were saying, had we done that mission before and like kind of found the clues that we'd be followed, we could have changed the outcome.
There was so much potential for variation based on what they were described. Obviously, like we didn't get a chance to see how those changes played out, but they said like, depending on what you say, when you first get confronted by Solomon, he might end up actually really pissed and like leave and not want to help you. And I was like, well, what happens if
what happens
without him?
Good example of that too, I would say, is so you save the president in the first mission. You take her to a safe house. They had to skip around a little bit, so we were missing some of the context. But when the president asked you to find Solomon Reed, the sleeper cell, she asked you to take an oath because you're a official secret agent for the new United States.
Yes.
And you can take the oath or you don't have to. And if we decided not to take the oath, and Johnny, who returns, obviously, Johnny Silverhand, Keanu Reeves, was like, yeah, V, like stick it to the man, like don't help, like stay away from all that. But apparently you can also take the oath, and Johnny's pissed at you for taking the oath. But I think Johnny, to be honest, was one of my favorite parts of what we saw of the story because it's kind of, it seems like it's diving into another side of his character that we didn't see, which is the part of him that served in the military and was a deserter. I really liked Johnny in the base game. I thought he brought a lot of gravitas and energy to the story, but I feel like there were aspects of him that weren't super well explored and almost kind of like different sides of his personality that kind of butted heads, and I'm curious to see what they explore, especially if they're heading down this sort of like ex-military deserter direction.
And it really makes it feel like integrated into the main game because he is so involved. It doesn't feel like it's a side tangent. I mean, the whole motivation for saving the president is Songbird, the person who like contacts you on the radio.
It puts out the SOS.
She promises like, I can get rid of the chip in your head. So it like almost reads as like an alternate path to like progress the main story potentially. We're not really sure how it'll play out.
Yeah, they didn't really answer our question about that. We were like, so does this tie into the main story? And they said, well, there are things like The Witcher. It's similar to how Hearts of Stone in The Witcher 3, how you'd get the mark on Geralt's face, and people in the story would comment on it. Yeah. But it didn't necessarily tie directly into it. But the way they're setting this up, it seems like it might tie more into the main story. Totally. And it got us thinking, like, could this potentially lead to a different ending? Something like that, which again, they were cagey about, mostly because they just don't want to spoil it, which I think is totally fair, but I get the feeling that it will affect the ending to some degree, which I think is really cool. One thing that I was really impressed by with Johnny, and this kind of leads into a whole other thing, was I immediately noticed that his character model looked way better than the base game. They like redid it, and then that gets into a whole thing that they were talking to us about, which is they have actually touched like the whole game and have made a ton of changes, which I was not expecting. Pavel Sasko, who was with us, quest director at CD Projekt Red and for Cyberpunk, was saying that there's not a system that they didn't either tweak, update, or just redo entirely. And it's impressive, and I think it's going to breathe life into the entire experience.
Totally, yeah. I mean, just like a small example they gave was how they wanted to reimagine the way like health works in combat. I mean, if you remember cyberpunk space combat. It gets pretty hard at the point and where I remember just like every 5 seconds I'd just be like shooting up just because like you're just constantly getting hit. And so they wanted to change like the way damage works so that you're not needing to do that as much. And they said, so because of that, they make actual like health rarer to find. There's actually a cooldown now.
And it's a lot more effective.
And it's a lot more effective. And that also then leans into like other stuff, like they've completely changed the way armor works now. It's no longer tied to clothing. It's now like tied to your cybernetics. And they've completely reworked the way cybernetics work as well.
Yeah, which
really exciting.
Is probably one of the most interesting things that they've changed, because this time, I mean, it was hard to get a full understanding of how it worked because we were only just kind of like guided through the menus, got to peek it. But it's similar in that you can install a bunch of cybernetics, but you can't just go crazy right from the start and install a bunch of cybernetics all over your body.
You kind of have to limit.
You have a limit that you can increase as you, I think, level up and get more cybernetics. And as you progress, you'll be able to get more. And eventually, once you hit the threshold, you will start to get debuffs for having all of these, which is sort of supposed to simulate cyberpsychosis, which is cool because that is a big part of the cyberpunk universe. And that was kind of absent in terms of your character in the vanilla game. I don't think it's going to get as crazy as like what we saw in Edge Runners, for example.
Sure.
But it's neat that like there will be actual drawbacks to just cybering yourself up.
They want to give a weight to the cybernetics in a way they kind of lacked in the base game. And then there's like so much more that they talked about. There's the skill tree, completely reworked the way skills work. They said they wanted to get away from skills being like percentage based, where it's just like, you know, you are getting stronger, but it doesn't...
It's like stat buffs.
It doesn't feel like you're getting stronger. So now they said they wanted to go more in like a perk-based direction, where it actually feels like you add a thing and you can feel the substantial, like there's, I have a new ability now. So curious to see how they'll actually feel, but I mean, based on both that and the cybernetics, like, I feel like that's gonna completely change the way that game flows.
I was excited to play Phantom Liberty story-wise. I had my issues with Cyberpunk 2077 story, but overall, I enjoyed those characters. I enjoyed that world, and I liked a lot of the narrative threads in that game. So I was excited to see what they do with Phantom Liberty.
Totally.
But I think, honestly, what I am most excited about is revisiting the original game with all of these changes and updates, and just seeing how that changes, not the story's the same, but just how it changes like how I interact with that world, how I get stronger, how I level up my cybernetics, how I build my character. And I think that's going to draw a lot of people to it.
I mean, there's like, I feel like there's just more stuff I keep remembering that they added. Like, they've completely reworked the whole police system now. That was a big thing.
That is an important one to talk about. I feel like we should talk about that for a little bit.
Yes, because people like complained about it because it wasn't great. It wasn't very good. So they've reworked the way it works now. So I think they said like level 1, they'll basically just like check the area around.
Yeah, so wherever, like if you ran someone over and they get alerted, they'll come to that area, check it out. If you're gone, probably won't find you. But if you're still there and you keep causing trouble, 2 stars, 3 stars, and then it builds up to...
Yeah, so at level 5, they straight up call max attack on you. And they said, unfortunately we didn't get there because we died before. We were
mainlining the story, we died, and I was like, I don't have time.
But they say that you actually have a boss fight that you have to do against them, which I think is really cool. And like, that seems like a fun challenge that like I want to pop in with my like endgame character and just like see if I can like survive and
take
like,
out max attack.
Like that would be cool. It was kind of nuts how much they've added to this game. Like, I think we knew going in, you know, they're gonna have a good story, they're gonna have Idris Elba in it, and I was feeling confident that that stuff would probably be pretty good. What really impressed me was their willingness to take this as an opportunity to also just like go back in and
almost rewrite the DNA.
Yes,
of this game.
Rewriting the DNA is a great way to describe it. So yeah, I mean, that's our impressions on Cyberpunk 2077. Jake, you also have a written thing up as well.
A written thing, yep, which goes into more depth, a little more specific. So if you want to check that out, you should do it.
Yeah, and for all things Summer Games Fest, stay here at GameSpot.